Welcome to richplanet.net, the programme which aims to uncover the truth behind the alien and UFO mystery. I'm Richard D. Hall, and in this week's programme I speak to veteran UFO investigator David Cayton to uncover some more of his Bob Lazar cases. Okay, then if we move on to another of the Cayton Files, 1994, another one involving electricity, this time a substation, not a power station.
Oh, yes.
Am I right in thinking that? So this was a Norweb 132 kilovolt substation.
Yes.
So tell us about that one, David.
Yeah. Well, this was down at Blackburn. I'd been to Grassington to see Tony anyway. On a Sunday it was. About a week prior to that, he'd had a phone call from a police officer who was quite senior, had some rank, although he was just retiring. He'd been in some white Dicky Bow dinner do in Blackburn and came into conversation with some Norweb engineers who were describing a UFO hovering over this 132 kV substation.
So that would be, so if you have a power line coming from a power station, when it gets to a population centre, you have these big electrical transformers which step the voltage down to a lower voltage that would be used in a factory or a housing estate or whatever. So there's, as far as I'm aware, there's no moving parts there, but it's basically it's for converting the electricity, stepping it down, etc. And there's huge quantities of energy flowing through these facilities. Okay.
There's all the transformers and the insulators and whatever. It's all fenced off with a metal fence, with warning signs. Danger, keep out, and all the rest of it. And Tony thought, this chap had said it was Whiteberg. Anyway, that's quite correct. At the end of the M65, which ended at that point in Blackburn at the time, was a massive roundabout. And I'd looked on the OS map as well, and I realised there was about 5 power lines all concentrating into that point. And as I came off the motorway, I could see in this was a compound opposite with big cable drum, and that was the Norweb maintenance compound. And across the road, across the traffic lights, across the junction, was this substation. And on the security post at the compound, they got a little brick building with the gates and a tower with the camera on. And apparently the Norweb security guy at the time had swiveled the camera 180 degrees round across the road and videoed, again there would be tape running I guess, of this craft. But what was even more exciting to us were there were little short people, presumably aliens was the word used, were moving around inside this very dangerous high voltage fenced off area. Right. So anyway, being a Sunday, it was pretty quiet. I parked up nearby and went to the gates, and the security post was shut. But I spotted a security man, who worked for Securicor at the time, this guy at the fence. And it was like a double fence, 2 lots of gates. We were close enough to have a conversation. And I showed him my little badge again and said I want to inquire about this UFO incident. And he didn't seem fazed by it either. But he said he hadn't worked there very long and couldn't tell me much about it, but I needed to speak to his supervisor. So he gave me a name of this person and a phone number. Anyway, I noticed while we're having this chat, 2 guys had come to the security post and they obviously wanted to get into it, and they've obviously forgotten the code for the key, and they were fiddling with all the buttons. And they kept looking to see what I was doing, talking to the security man. So after a few moments they came over to me and they asked the usual polite question like, can we help you? But really what they mean is, what the hell are you doing here? What's your business? So I told them again. I was quite open, showed my security little badge thing. Again, they didn't. I expected to be. I expected to say, "Beggar off," But they said they gave me a name of a manager, 2 people actually, and a phone number to ring in the week, because this was a Sunday evening now. It was about 7 o'clock when I got there, so it was probably 7:30. So I said okay. So I went back to the car, to drive off home, and then realised I hadn't left a Quest calling card with my phone number on, so they couldn't possibly run me back.
Yeah.
By the time I got back, the original chap had supposed to have disappeared, and these two other fellas. Anyway, I noticed there was a maintenance vehicle was coming in with a trailer on the back with a generator, and the guy was opening the gates to go in. So I gave him my little card and said I'd spoken to a colleague, a security man, just moments ago, within 10 minutes ago anyway. Can you give it to him? So he said he would.
Right.
So then I got in the car to go home. Now I'm about 45 minutes drive back to Stockport from the Blackburn. And when I pulled in at the front, my wife, Vivian, was on the front drive with a friend who lives about a mile or so away, Ken Burks, and I could see she was in distress, and I thought, what's going on here? And got out of the car, and she was all excited, and she'd had a very disturbing phone call, probably within 30 minutes of me leaving Whiteburn, and this chap in a very educated voice, very sort of officious, intimated that I'd been detained at the Wire, or this Norbert facility, but he didn't name it where it was, which got her in a tizzy, thinking I was under arrest,
right,
and perhaps in a local police cell or something, and so I was amazed that leaving from the moment of leaving my phone number with that chap who would have to find that person I gave it to in the first place. Bear in mind, there'd be nobody of any senior level in the facility on a Sunday evening who, for them to ring my wife, you know, and she said all he said was, having established it was the right number for the Cayton household, and I wasn't back to speak to him, and she was they were obviously winding Vivian up, deliberately to upset her and frighten her, to put me off pursuing the investigation.
Yes. And
Tony Dodd had said to me that's a common practice with ufologists, and it's happened to him with his wife Pauline in the past. If is to go for the wife to get some domestic flack,
yes,
to influence you to back off. That's a trick to use.
And the video footage was never observed by yourself.
No, because I guess that was probably ended up in the MOD or somewhere eventually.
Right. Right.
Just like the one from the Padiham power station.
Right. Okay.
So we never got the evidence. Was buried.
In terms of UFOs above power lines and power stations, I mean, I know that there's been sightings of UFOs above Hartlepool nuclear power station.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that they're interested in energy, or do you think that's what they think?
Definitely.
You think so?
Whether they need the water, they certainly take water, and they might need electricity to top up and charge the systems in the craft.
Yes.
Nobody knows. But they're certainly interested in probably more nuclear power stations than conventional power stations. And there's many reports from around the world, from Argentina to Timothy Good reports in Puerto Rico. And a lady rang me up one day saying as his child, she was about 8 years old, they were playing on the beach on Anglesey in North Wales, sort of west side of Anglesey at the top. There's Wilfer power station, which is nuclear.
Right.
And this craft came out of the sea by the power station.
Right.
Hovered over the power station and off, which she said they were very excited about it. They weren't frightened.
Yeah.
So they're interested in our technologies per se, you know, not
Yes.
just the power stations.
Yeah.
They're keeping a tabs, I think, on our advancement, our technical advancement.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Because if they were actually extracting power then from the grid, then that would be measured, you know, on the national grid's systems. They would know straight away if there was power.
They'd have a drop, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And they would need to cater for that drop by stoking up one of their power stations boilers, which is what they do when basically you have the break in Coronation Street when everyone puts their kettle on at the same time.
Up, yes,
they have to have a spinning reserve on the grid, which then it caters for that for that eventuality. But they would know. In other words, what I'm saying is that if they were withdrawing power, but would they tell us if that happened? Probably not.
No, I should think not. No, it's all part of the cover-up, isn't it? When you think about it.
So you think then that you know that, I mean, you and I agree that there's a cover-up, that perhaps cameras around power stations and nuclear facilities, that the MOD have perhaps got one eye or some kind of influence over those kind of security cameras where UFOs are likely to appear.
Yeah, because they must know, like we know, that where these things occur on a more regular basis. It's a way of monitoring the situation, but controlling the situation. Yeah, so that I'm sure there will be a link when a power station manager reports an incident. Some guy, a faceless guy in a grey suit, will appear and collect the tape or whatever, and have a chat, and that'll be the end of it as far as they're concerned. So it'll be more stuff in the files that they are not releasing.
Yes.
So, just like the Cyprus case and Group Captain Burgess's case, I'm sure, well, they've probably been destroyed anyway, but I'm sure some of those cases will be different files. So what they're looking at now to filter out, to come into the Public Records Office at Kew, will never appear. So they only release what they think is fairly innocuous stuff, which we're not going to do them any particular damage to.
And all they have to do is say that, well, we think this is a matter of national security, so we're going to put the top secret stamp on it, and then it'll basically we'll never get to see it.
It might be another 70 years.
The next case we're going to talk about in the Cayton Files is a case from 1996, which involves the Jodrell Bank radio telescope. Now, can you tell us a bit of background about that particular radio telescope before we go into the actual case itself, David? We're here at the Jodrell Bank radio telescope near Manchester, and I'm with UFO researcher David Cayton. Can you tell us a little bit about this telescope, David?
I don't know a lot about it, other than it was commissioned and in use, I think, in 1966, and it was part of Manchester University's facility. We moved it out here because of the quiet surroundings and away from any electronic interference, apparently. It was used in the early days to track the Russian Sputnik, and it's mainly radio astronomy, and they're involved with the SETI program these days. That's a search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So they've got a contract with the SETI, and they use other people use the telescope, and students and what have you. And Professor Bernard Lovell was the first scientist who was in charge. And though he's retired now, he still lives sort of down the road a couple of miles. And it's not the first UFO experience or event they've had here.
So how did you get wind of this UFO case?
It was a UFO meeting going on at a local venue, and this 16-year-old lad approached me about some other UFO incident, actually, but then he confided that his mother, along with her parents, like his grandparents, who were in the 80s, who live in the village of Goostrey, which is behind Jodrell Bank Radio Telescope, about a mile and a half away. And on the 18th of August 1996, it was a Sunday evening at 10 o'clock, she was driving her parents back to their flat in Macclesfield, and they'd been to her house for a Sunday evening meal or lunch, whatever. And they were driving on this back twisty lane, which is quite narrow, and Marie Brickhill was driving, and she incidentally was a senior manager at the British Red Cross at the Knutsford, Cheshire headquarters. And her parents were in the back. Her father was like 85 at the time, and although his legs were in trouble, his brain was sharp as a tack, and he was a member of the Royal Observer Corps in the war years. And he exclaimed from the back as they're driving back, "What the heck is that?" And what they saw, and it was dark then because it was August, and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and what they thought it might be cigar shaped, but they weren't 100% sure whether it was. So this thing was like 300 to 400 feet hovering motionless right above the main Lovell reflector dish.
300 to 400 feet in height or in size?
In height.
In height.
Above the top of the dish.
Right above the dish.
The dish is like 250 feet in diameter, roughly speaking. If I got my facts, I think that's correct. And it was set at a 45-degree angle, which usually means it's in use.
Right.
When it's parked up, it's vertical with the dish, the bowl pointing skyward. And there was, what really got a father going was there was a beam, a very soft white beam, not glaring, that you couldn't sort of look at it. It was a very soft white beam, probably 80 feet or so in diameter, and beaming down, but parallel. And this is what really bugged him, because it was no divergence of this light from 300 feet above the dish going downwards into the bowl. And Mary didn't stop the car, they carried on driving, which was perhaps a shame in hindsight. So I think they were a little bit spooked by it. And when I talked to her afterwards, they recall there was two little groups of 3 white lights on each end of this shape, which they thought might be cigar shaped, and that was it. So it took her about 50 minutes to get to Macclesfield, where the back road joins the main A535, to get them safely in the flat and drive back. And when she drove back, she was a bit horrified to find the object was still there.
Really?
So she drove home, so we're talking about 50-minute slot. Her husband, who by then it was late Sunday evening, had a few glasses of wine, had his slippers on, and she tried to persuade him to come back in the car with him and view this thing himself, assuming it was still there. And he declined. But he did regret it afterwards, because he had no reason to disbelieve his wife and her parents. So I thought, this is very good. So I made inquiries. I went round lots of properties around the telescope, whose windows, I guess, viewed the telescope without success. I approached the local Knutsford Guardian paper to put an appeal for witnesses in that, and a journalist called Paul Broster took it up and added his own flavour, as journalists do. And then I was pointed to a local freebie paper, which is run from Goosery Village, and saw the guy there, and he ran a little piece, and he was very interested, because he said to me there was a similar UFO event in 1966, very shortly after the telescope was first commissioned, which again to me is another clue that they're interested in our technology. And bear in mind, this was at the time, if not one of the largest radio telescopes in the world. Anyway, we ran this story, and unfortunately, although there were plenty of people who ran the paper, and I got a few other associated cases out of it, I couldn't find another solid witness at the time to have seen this. I went to the facility, to the laboratories, but into the public area to start with, and asked in the shop, I wanted to speak to a technical person. And they said, oh, we've got some volunteers from the Macclesfield Astronomical Society who man the public area, the exhibits, and the planetarium. So I was pointed to this guy who was on duty, who turned out to be a retired Dan Air pilot. And I told him the story, and he was very interested and intrigued. So he said, I'll find out what I can for you. Because I said, if this beam of light was beaming down into the telescope, and if it was in use at the time, it could well have interfered with the programs that were running. You know, or did any of the staff actually spot it? Although I guess that unless you go out to the laboratory door and move 50, 100 yards back and then look up, because it was right over the dish. So you wouldn't see it if you stood probably underneath the dish, you see what I mean? Anyway, he went through this locked door with the keys on and disappeared into the laboratory, the non-public area, and after about 10 minutes, this rather unpleasant woman emerged, because I said to him, I'd like to look at the occurrence log for that evening of Sunday the 18th of August to see if they'd had a problem. and she was quite abrasive, refused to show me the occurrence log, but at the same time saying they weren't aware of any problems, and please go away, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I thought the way she said things and her manner, it indicated to me they knew something about it.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, the journalist, the Oxford Guardian, Broster, as journalists do, had jumped the gun when he was doing his article for the paper, had phoned Jodrell Bank to ask about it, and was probably told a similar put-off. So anyways, they'd been tipped off that this, if it was a secret and they knew about it, and they were probably a bit alarmed that a journalist had approached them about it. So that's perhaps spoilt my investigation a little bit.
And what about SETI's involvement?
Yes, well, I happen to know one of the senior people there, Dr. Ian Morrison, because I'd been to a talk given by him in Poynton called Man's Place in the Universe. And before Jodrell Bank were awarded this SETI contract, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence business, as a subcontractor, he made remarks at the talk, and I had a chat to him afterwards, and he said that SETI was really a waste of time, and looking for radio signals for intelligence life is not very practical, because he made some example which he did repeat in the Manchester Evening News sometime later, that if you targeted a star group 150 light years away, the speed of the sound waves, it would take like 150 years.
The light waves, yeah.
And then 150 years to get a message back. So you're talking about a time scan of 300 years. And I said to him, do you really think that advanced technologies would have our steam-driven radio systems, to receive our signals in the first place, and have transmitters and systems still going, centuries old to them, to come back to us? And he agreed. He said it was a non-starter. He publicly changed his tune a bit after they got the contract, because they were desperate for the cash to come in to keep the telescope going.
Yes.
And they use a lot of subcontractor or private people pay to use the facility. So it is quite busy, and he did assure me that it was in operation that Sunday evening. Now, he'd been on holiday and returned that weekend and was back in work on the Monday morning, the 19th.
Right.
And he said to me, I wasn't aware there was a problem, because I'm in charge of this element, I would have known about it. Now, it might have been kept from him, or he was lying to me, but I didn't get the impression he was. So it may be that whatever this energy, this beam of light coming down into the dish, may not have upset the apparatus and the work they were doing. So they could have been completely ignorant of the whole affair.
And rather embarrassing for SETI that they've got this radio telescope pointed out into deep space, and there's a UFO hovering 300 feet above the telescope, which, so it doesn't surprise you that they maybe want to keep quiet about the incident.
Very ironic.
David's files are full of intriguing and notable cases, not just on UFOs, but animal mutilation and crop circles as well. I asked him why he hadn't yet written a book with all of this information, and he said he just hadn't had time. Next week, I will be looking into secret underground bases, and the following week, another instalment of the Cayton Files.
What are we going to say?
What are we going to say?
I don't know about that.
Okay.